Daily on the all-new SKOR North AM 1500, SKORNorth.com, all those good places in which you can now hear us. Zulgad, Matthew Coller, and Courtney Cronin, ESPN. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you are in today because you're not going to be in next Tuesday.
Not going to be in next
correct?
Tuesday, and because I needed to be around you because it's been a minute since the new transition, and I haven't had any fire takes. I haven't had any just absurd comments about the kicking game. I need some predictions. No
one's been fired.
No one's been fired. I mean, yeah. What's it say behind you? How many days? 20. Has that been updated?
20 days.
20 days since the Minnesota.
Tips?
Yeah, since the Minnesota coach has been fired.
Now, are you going on a trip here?
Ooh, now hold on.
I got bad news though. Real quick, the curse of the trip, right?
Yeah.
But now, if the Vikings make coaching changes, because I got an email about several coaches being removed from the website.
I want to know who's sending that like mass email out to individuals.
Wait, what's going on?
We got both of us got. I assume we got the same email. I get like updates on this, like Clancy Barone has been removed from the Vikings website. Terrence Newman has been removed from the Vikings website. Drew Petzing has been removed from the Vikings website. It's like someone's literally sitting there refreshing this thing. It's either that or it's someone in the building. So
would you be surprised at all, though, with Terrence Newman if he didn't want to come back for another year?
No, not at all, because I think that this was a harder transition than more people realized for him coming off of, basically right before training camp. They're like, you got to retire because we need that spot. And he's forced into coaching in a way. And I think he did a good job with Holton Hill, Mackenzie Alexander, Mike Hughes for the time that he played. But I think that there might be, and just from some things I'm hearing, just, more of an internal thing for him too, of that transition was a lot harder, that he had to make it. He had to expedite it. And I think that was harder for him than most people realized.
It's also a really different gig. It's not you just get to show up like a player and take your same approach and do things your way. Now, all of a sudden, especially someone who had been around for such a long time, he had power, sort of make his own hours type of thing, that he would run his own sessions and kind of own that room. But then all of a sudden you have to be sort of rank and file as a coach, and the hours are way different. You're staying there, especially Zimmer wants everyone to grind until the end of time, right?
Yeah.
And if you made as much as Terrence Newman made, if he doesn't truly love that part of it and maybe wants to be in something else in football or go start a business or whatever it's going to be for his future.
Play golf.
Yeah.
I've heard he's a very good golfer.
Just go drink wine.
I would do that.
Right. I
mean, you're that rich.
Is that a job? Could I do that professionally?
He probably never had a chance to decompress, to back away from football and take some time off.
And I also think there's something to be said about not everybody is made to be a coach. Yes. And that's not to say, but Terrence was the mentor in that defensive back room for years. He kind of, as Matt said, had this pseudo coaching role where, you look to him for advice. If you need extra time, extra help, you're going to go to him. But to do that full time, to really fully transition into that, where that is your professional title, I think is a little difficult.
There's got to be a difference too between playing and helping guys, and then on game day you're all together, right? And you're executing, and they're doing well, and you're like, this is great. And then removing yourself completely from that, so you're helping guys, but you can't play. I would think that's a big step. And there's got to be a big difference between mentoring, but you're my teammate, and then being, okay, now I'm your boss and I don't get to play the game, and this really is not that much fun.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult transition to make, but I would say that as a position coach, potentially for his post-football career, even if he doesn't stay here and stay on this coaching staff, I think that is the right thing for him. Just maybe down the road, that just in my dealings, in my dealings with him, I think he could be a head coach. He's one of the few guys that you ever run into that doesn't just understand his position. He understands every single position, everything that's going on the field at once. And that could be what he decides to do. But throwing himself into the situation after doing a training camp as a player is a really tough spot. So I would understand if he wanted to back away first and say, all right, let me take some time off away from football and then decide whether to get back in. He's a guy that is so well respected that if he wants to, someone is going to give him a job pretty much whenever he asks.
And I think the thing here, too, is with the coaching changes, as you mentioned, there will probably be some news. Now the Super Bowl is going to be over by the time we're talking about this next week, or time you guys are talking about it next week.
And you're gone, so for sure changes are coming.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be on the side of a mountain. It'll be offensive line coach is named, special teams coach is officially named, things like that. But we can infer too. I mean, with Clancy Barone, we know with Gary Kubiak being here that there's some sort of package deal stuff going on in terms of who, his voice and who he wants to bring in and help bring, in that realm for the offensive line job. That's why I think Rick Dennison's name was thrown in there right away. But it's kind of weird that that's taken as long to get sorted out. I wonder if they know
and we're just waiting, because I think that every other team is not supposed to break news during this week. Is that right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, that could have been last week. That was 2 weeks ago. That was the 14th of January that those hires came through. So, I mean, there's time for that stuff to happen. But I do anticipate come, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this coaching staff at least will start to piece together a little bit more.
I kind of feel bad for Clancy Barone. Talk about a guy who was thrown into a tough spot when Tony Sperano passed away, and then he didn't have his offseason to even think about what he would do with the offensive line. And having talked to Clancy, I thought he was a really bright guy and knew his offensive line. I believe he won the Super Bowl as an offensive line coach with the Broncos.
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, when Mike Zimmer talked about, well, Tony Sperano was big for this and big for this and big for this, it was like kind of made Clancy Barone look bad, but it was not an easy spot for him.
And Clancy was supposed to be tight ends coach, correct?
Yes.
And Downing was supposed to come in as Todd was going to be
senior offensive assistant.
Yeah. Yeah. And so those guys got thrown in then.
The number of jobs that are out there on these teams is crazy.
Well, and Todd's moved on. He's
Tennessee, right?
Tennessee now.
Offensive line coach would be, I think, incredibly difficult. Like that's one job where if I did that job and you came to me and I knew I was good, I want a lot of money. I want a lot.
I mean, it controls the entire team. It controls the entire offense. And I think the thing that was just a little interesting with the Clancy Barone situation, I understand with Andrew Janocko. I mean, this was a way kind of to mitigate, having to bring outside voices in when Tony Sperano passes to make them both co-offensive line coaches. But in reality, I mean, you have a guy like Clancy Barone who has been doing this decades and won a Super Bowl. I don't know. I mean, you kind of look at the way that looks. Like, why would Janocko not just stay in the job that he was at as the offensive line assistant and make, I think that sometimes there's too many voices. That's what I felt all year. And I mean, in talking to players and just kind of the way the offensive line shook out, that's the vibe that I got.
It's interesting when you look at the New England Patriots, their offensive line's getting a ton of praise, and they deserve it. They played extremely well in the AFC Championship. They have all sorts of different run schemes that they can use. Sometimes it's a zone. Sometimes it's power schemes. You have guys pulling and adapting quickly to what they see at the line of scrimmage. I was watching last night Peyton Manning's Detail, where he breaks down the AFC Championship looking at Tom Brady. And there's one particular instance where he can't hear anything, and he's trying to get David Andrews, the center, his attention, and he makes a change real quick. Andrews looks to his left, looks to his right, and then they snap the ball, and those guys are right on point. And one of the things that I noticed when looking through this is the Patriots have had the same offensive lineman for a few years, and they've developed them under the same offensive line coach. And I think about how much that matters for the Vikings going forward. So you've got Pat Elflein and you've got Brian O'Neill that you're going to be working with going forward. You have to find the guys that you're going to stick with and develop them, and the offensive line coach that you're going to stick with and develop them under one coach with one technique and one idea, and let these guys master it, because I think you see the benefits of that. 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen for the Patriots have been there for a few years and developed, and then they just brought in one left tackle last year in the offseason.
Is Elflein long-term here a center or a guard, do you guys think?
I'm not getting off the center train until I have to.
I think he's a center that was put in a really tough position this year.
And he was hurt, too.
And he was hurt. He's playing with 2 surgically repaired body parts, which I don't think people take into consideration when they want to write him off and say, well, he's never going to get back to the version he was as a rookie.
Are they saying that already?
I mean, I've gotten that for months, that, I don't think he's ever going to get back to where he was. He's a different player now. Well, I mean, the guy had to go out there barefoot during warmups to get feeling in his ankle.
Yeah.
Oh, did he really?
Yes, that was. I saw him doing it. The Jets game was really cold, and it was a wind tunnel down there. And I'm like, why is he barefoot? And so I went and asked him after the game, and he said, because it's.
Now that's a reporter.
I know.
Good job.
Perceptive.
Good job.
I went down there. I went to the locker room afterwards, and I asked him about it. And it's, it's just interesting when people talk about off-season surgeries and things that happen between the months of January and training camp. I mean, we're talking about Mike Hughes now. Will he be ready? That's the $1 million question. Well, you think, okay, if the timetable for this ACL can follow Dalvin Cook's, because from what we heard, it's a very similar tear where there's not a lot of other ligament damage. They should be ready, but like you just never know. Bodies take a long time to respond, and they all respond differently, which I think with a guy like Pat Elflein, where it's the shoulder surgery and then it's the ankle surgery, there's a lot on top of each other.
And when you look at what he had to face this year too, they faced Aaron Donald and Fletcher Cox in his first 2 starts, and then Akeem Hicks twice. There's the top 3 defensive tackles in 4 games. And when you look at his just Pro Football Focus grades, those are usually the games where he's having the most trouble. And I think pretty much any NFC center would. And I was looking over just by position over the league, how many of the centers in the NFC put together big PFF grades? Not that many, because they're facing a murderer's row of defensive tackles, and that's always going to be tough. And I also felt like Pat Elflein didn't get a whole lot of scheme help from John DeFilippo either. I mean, we saw him in 2017 getting out there on screens all the time, doing the zone blocking, which I thought was really his strength. And there wasn't so much of that. It was a lot of line up and face Akeem Hicks one-on-one and get blown up because Hicks is just an unbelievable player. I don't think that Elflein is ever going to be the number 1 center in the NFL. But if you're bailing after 2 years because he had a lot of tough circumstances in year 2, I think that would be a mistake. There's also the leadership point of being a center is huge, and the other players rave about Pat Elflein from this standpoint. And I talked to Jeremiah Searles last season, who used to play with the Vikings, and he went into great detail on the Purple Podcast about how Elflein came in as a rookie and really showed that he was ready not only just to understand the NFL, but to be a leader. And that's not so easy to find.
And I think, over time, like as a rookie to where he's now going to be going into year 3, I think your pulling ability gets better. I think your inline blocking gets better. Your downfield blocking, like just, how quickly you can move laterally. Those things take time. And he was He was the first rookie center to start since who? That was the big thing going into 2017. I mean, he had a major responsibility as a rookie.
And he was really good.
And he was very, very good.
Until he got hurt, yeah.
And so that brings to, I think, a different argument here, like what we talked about on Tuesday, what they do in free agency. If you go out and you pay top dollar for a guard to put next to Pat Elflein and potentially next to whether I think left guard's the first one.
They impact each other.
And
sure.
that helps both positions. That helps your left tackle, that helps your center.
Absolutely.
So I think that really does make the argument to why they need to make the offensive line a top priority, but not just in the draft, in free agency. And you think about the names, the Roger Saffolds of the world. Like those are who you should be focusing on, and that should be your target.
But it's a great point about the players to his left and right and who they were in 2017, not only just better players in Joe Berger and Nick Easton, but also those guys were really tight. I mean, they had all been centers before. They all understood what reads were supposed to be made there. He had good support from those guys and also similar players, especially Easton with his athleticism and his quickness. And those guys worked really well with chemistry there. I never thought that was anywhere close. Remmers was just trying to hold on for dear life each week.
That was unfair.
It was unfair.
I still contend that was not fair.
And he gets hammered every week by the fans. Like this guy has never played guard before.
And I mean, he was the only one of the bunch that could do it, which when you're taking a look at the interior play and what needs to be fixed in terms of pass protection, I mean, you need to get better athletes in there. You had 2 very average athletes. Mike Remmers probably a little bit, in terms of athleticism, probably a little bit better than Tom Compton. But either way, you're looking at very middle of the pack, C+ level athletes right here. And whether you want more finesse players in there, I don't know. I mean, I think that's something that they have to look at when they're figuring out, okay, what is the identity of this offensive line? If we want to be a zone blocking team, we need to get better physical athletes in here.
Absolutely.
That's got to be the first thing you look at.
So who's back on opening day of camp? Who's back right now? Reef probably, although I would look to upgrade there, but it's tough.
Yeah.
Reef probably, Elflein, whom else?
O'Neal.
Okay, at right tackle for sure.
Yes.
There's
he starts, okay.
A few interesting things about that. With Reef, his contract, you can't really move on from it. But I am thinking of Riley Reef the same way we think about quarterbacks, where the general rule of thumb is you shouldn't pay them too much unless you have an elite one, or if you can get one on a rookie contract. That's how you're going to build to win. That's usually the way that it's worked out over the last few years since these quarterback contracts exploded. But I think left tackle is the same way. if you can't find one who is elite, you shouldn't pay him what they pay Riley Reiff. So they should be looking to get out from under Riley Reiff as soon as they can. Now, that can't happen with him being cut. They're probably not going to trade him because the other options aren't great. But I look at this as the draft. Finding a starting left tackle for the future in the draft should be a main priority. And I'm not convinced just because of a decent half year by Brian O'Neill, which was just okay. And I think some people thought was better than it was because he had good
he was
sack against numbers.
The whole sacks allowed thing, the PFF stat, I mean, it's a little
can tell
inflated.
You lies sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers there are not exactly straightforward. But I do think that, it's a bright spot on a pretty sour unit.
And don't forget, we initially thought he was going to be a disaster, and he wasn't.
We thought he was going to be a project.
Exactly. But so I think that we all said it's not that bad because in relation to what was going on elsewhere on that line, it wasn't awful, but that doesn't make it great.
It wasn't, but Pro Football Focus had him 53rd out of 61 tackles.
Yeah.
So it also wasn't good.
It's all relative.
He was getting blown up a lot, and he was one of the reasons why Kirk Cousins had to get rid of the ball so quickly on so many occasions. So I think there is some thought that he's going to take this big leap forward. It's very much we'll see with that. He is the starting right tackle, though. There's no question there. I just think when we get to the draft, if you're talking about a potential future left tackle there in the draft, just like the Detroit Lions did when they had Riley Reiff, you draft the Taylor Decker. You take that person, even though fans are going to want you to fill the right guard right away. It, to me, is a smarter play to draft the left tackle and try to develop that person to take over for Riley Reiff.
And the fact of the matter is, I don't want to, if I'm the Vikings, I don't want to overpay for a guard in free agency. The guard market's not very deep, but I think that I agree with you. I think that you're going to look to the draft to try to build your franchise left tackle. Although I think Brian O'Neill's probably your franchise left tackle.
I'm not sure about that yet. He's going to have to show that.
He's going to have to show it, but I think he has the potential to be. I think we can move on from Reiff, and eventually, if it all pans out the way it should, he could be your left tackle. But build your tackles, build your bookends through the draft, and try to upgrade however you can on the interior.
And if they drafted 3 offensive linemen with the first 3 picks, I don't think a single Vikings fan would be upset. And that is the approach that they should take with this offseason, is as many bodies as you can bring in, because it's always piecemealing it together year after year after year. And even the 2017 line, they cut Alex Boone on the last day, and then Pat Shurmur schemed a lot of their help. They were good early in the season, but when they had some injuries, they still had some problems.
That's my question. How much of this, and we all know that you need to improve the personnel for sure, how much of this is possibly also fixed with scheme? So how much of this can...
A lot.
Right, but I'm saying, so all of a sudden, all of these guys who look terrible, there's one who now thrives if the scheme changes to the right thing.
Sure. I think that's...
I'm not saying that's the fix. I'm saying how much the fix can that be?
The answer to me is Elfline could improve a lot with running the zone scheme more often, and the screen passes and the rollouts and the bootlegs and all those things. When I've been talking with Sage Rosenfels on the Purple podcast has really helped, because he played for Gary Kubiak for several years. And his big thing is Kubiak finds ways to not only help quarterbacks, but also help offensive linemen play to their strengths. Mm-hmm. And he pointed out that if you go back and look at some of those Houston Texans offensive linemen, they aren't all first-round picks who became Pro Bowlers. I love that quote
when he was talking about, let me try to pull it up, but I mean, there's what he said kind of in just like the gist of it was that their outside zone game leads to their play action. So it helps your offensive line. It helps Kirk Cousins. I think that's, twofold right there is what you're looking at.
Absolutely.
And,
I think he's going to get him moving too. That was the thing that we just saw so many times. Just we're all going to just stand in one spot and block our man in the shotgun. And it's just not going to work with this offensive line. It kind of blew my mind sometimes that they weren't moving Pat Elfline more often. And even Mike Remmers is not super slow. He can move and get out in space, but too many times it was standing there trying to dig in one-on-one with someone more talented.
Yeah, so here's when he was in Houston, when Sage was in Houston, this is what he was referring to, so they had Dwayne Brown, who was there. They drafted him at left tackle. He went to 2 Pro Bowls under Kubiak when he was there. Chris Myers was the one he said. That was it's a 6th-round center. He went to the Pro Bowl, I believe, in 2011 and in 2012. And then Wade Smith, who was just all over the place at left guard, went in 2012. So he turns no-name journeyman type talent into Pro Bowlers. And that's not necessarily, you can't change players, but you can scheme around them to make them better, to play to their strength, which is what they need to do to Kirk. I mean, that's where it all starts.
Yes, absolutely.
And the more that I look at the Pro Football Focus data, I come away with Kirk Cousins was exactly who Kirk Cousins always is.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Kirk coaster. There were the ups and downs. There were the games he didn't show. They're always going to be there with Kirk Cousins. He is not going to take risks. He's not going to scramble on the run like Pat Mahomes and throw when he's not looking at his receiver. He's not going to do those things. But you also see in the numbers where a lot of the quarterbacks who have success on the short, quick passes and things like that, they have good screen games. Well, screen game doesn't take any special execution all the time by a quarterback, right?
He's got to be accurate with it, which he's not.
Which he's not always.
Right. You can't throw a pick.
And you can't throw it behind you.
So, yes, it does take some abilities.
It's true.
When you're watching the defensive end shoulder to see if he's going to be coming at you, I think that's why, Kirk gets the yips back there. He's terrified on screen passes.
But the numbers from PFF for his accuracy on screens were below average, but not so much where you'd say, like, this guy can't throw a screen. Manufacturing yards is a huge thing, and I think that starts with the blocking schemes for those screen passes that a lot of times under Shermer, we saw, and people act like the offensive line was more talented. It really wasn't. Guys were getting hurt a lot.
So 5 guys playing new positions.
And Searles was in, Isadora was mixing in, and yet they still found ways to scheme the offensive line to what it did best.
Absolutely.
That's where we're going to see, I think, more success in 2019.
Let's take a break. More Purple Daily after this on the all-new SKOR North. Daily continues on the all-new SKOR North. We are in the TCL broadcast studios. Zulgad, Matthew Coller, and Courtney Cronin, ESPN.com, stopping by. She, of course, covers the Vikings. Let's talk some Super Bowl. We're finally past all the BS, I think, or we're close, right? We're past the media sessions where people ask their wacky questions. We're finally to a point. The buildup this year, I don't care about. I just don't care. I'm actually looking forward to the game itself, though. I think the game is going to, and the McVay-Belichick matchup to me is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, here's the interesting thing. I don't know if we're really past the newsworthy headlines yet. Tom Pelissero of NFL Network just tweeted that Rams running back Todd Gurley said Jared Goff has been nervous all week and was throwing up earlier today. That's not a good sign if the game's in 4 days.
He says Gurley was kidding. Read the full tweet.
I didn't see the. Wait a second. No, that just showed up. Let me see. Hold on. Tom Pelissero.
Right there. He says, yes, Gurley was kidding. So he must have maybe deleted the original tweet that you saw and added that because it was blowing up.
You know what, though?
Darn.
No, Gurley wasn't kidding.
Let's go for it.
He wasn't kidding. And his coach probably said, why the hell are you telling people this about our quarterback? So it's absolutely, I think this is gospel. I think Tommy tweeted the truth. Gurley got pushback, and now we are rescinding the story because Goff is hanging over the porcelain god right now.
Or we can just say that I probably got it wrong. I'll fall on the sword for that one.
It's much more fun.
But I'm with you.
If Jared Goff is vomiting right now, it's a much better story.
I think that
he's got norovirus. We could start that rumor.
Goff
Who's the backup quarterback?
He really showed something in that NFC Championship game, though. If he was going to vomit all over himself, then he would have done it in the second half of that game that they got behind early on. And it was really impressive to me how he led them down the stretch. Of course, they should have lost because of the call. But then when it got to overtime, he was the one that led the drive. It was impressive to see some of his plays under pressure. The Saints defense is not unbelievable, but they did get after him at times, and he made big-time throws.
Was Gurley hurt, do we think?
He said he wasn't. I think there's something lingering from the knee.
Okay.
I really do.
I'm not buying
why
that.
Would that happen? In all games, he had, six receiving yards total in that game?
Dropped a bunch.
Yeah, but McVay's not going to just be like, yeah, you're having a rough day. And by the way, it's the conference title game, so you're not going to play. I'm not buying that for 1 second.
You know what it reminded me of? Because I couldn't figure this out, what it was. Was it just nerves for Todd Gurley? It reminded me of Terrell Owens in the divisional game against the 49ers, where he makes the unbelievable catch at the end. And I was watching that game back, and Owens dropped like 4 passes in that game and fumbled. Sometimes somebody just has a really, really awful day, and McVay just pulled them right off the field.
I think it says something, though, to just – we talk about the genius of Sean McVay, but just being able to scheme around that. Arguably your best player is not having a good game, or he's hurt, or there's a combination of both. And you use this bowling ball and CJ Anderson to do what he did against.
Just because he is slightly overweight does not make him a bowling ball.
I think he enjoys that. He said, what did he say on Tuesday?
Why are you so defensive about that, Judd?
Fat people got feelings too.
I know, and he defended it and said, like, professionals can't tackle me.
Yeah, no, he's been great.
He's great.
He's been fantastic.
I think it's a great. That's one of my favorite storylines of the Super Bowl.
And the other thing to me about the Rams that's fun to watch is despite all the hype about this passing attack and this and that, blah blah blah. When you watch them, you realize how good that scheme is fundamentally too.
Yeah,
like it goes way beyond. Well, Goff can throw the ball, and they've got that's part of it, but their offense and the personnel and its use is really, really impressive.
It's a great example of it all coming together. Yes. They have a good offensive line led by one of the best left tackles of the last decade in Andrew Whitworth, who's their veteran leader guy. And they've got the offensive genius in Sean McVay, who uses it's funny that he talks about this, that he didn't invent any of these plays, but he uses so many different looks, but designs them to look the same way. And the way that he adapted to Mike Zimmer's defense, he knew exactly what Zimmer's defensive rules were for players and how they had to handle certain things, certain changes, certain pass-offs, certain checks, and then he just abused them. And that's where this matchup is going to be so great, because you've got the weapons, you've got the players, and a quarterback in Goff who can execute it all. and then a wizard who's calling the plays. But does he stick with what he's usually done? Does he make changes? Does he flip his running scheme to go power all of a sudden? Like, that's what makes this
and
one
Belichick
really
will be set for it too.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
That's the thing about this. The game, okay, of all the playoff games, here's the one I don't get. And I watched it unfold and I thought, idiots. The Chargers-Ravens game, right? The Chargers' defensive scheme was brilliant. It was great. Basically, do what you do, but I'm going to throw safeties out there as linebackers, and I'm going to stop you. And you watch that, and you're like, this is great. And then the Chargers play the Patriots. And it's like
they ran it right down their throat.
And it's like a different coach. It's like, okay, you knew the Patriots were going to watch that film, right? And the Patriots were going to come and try and abuse what you did against Paul. But instead of adjusting to it, it was like, well, no, these are our principles now. I thought to myself, this is like a game coached by a different person. I didn't get it at all.
Well, everybody thinks that Sean McVay is going to come out with all this trickery and wizardry and what he's done all season long. You don't think Bill Belichick's prepared for that? Yeah. You don't think Bill Belichick has a catalog of every single game that Sean McVay has coached just neatly lined up in his periphery right now, and he's going to be able to pull on that and be like, hey, we get it. You're 11 personnel. It throws off a lot of teams because you have like 10 different plays you can run out of one set. It's not going to throw me off because you know why? I've won nearly 10 Super Bowls. I was about to say a dozen, but I was like, what's 10? Like, what's,
A dozen is 12.
A dozen is 12. I do know that.
Go with 8 or 9.
Thank you, Manny. I'll go with 8 or 9. But that's the thing. Like, when you take a look at the storylines and, David versus Goliath and all that stuff of Sean McVay, the young kid on the block trying to prove himself that, at 32 years old, he's going to win a Super Bowl. I mean, let's not give Bill Belichick some credit here.
But Belichick doesn't want it. Like, Belichick loves this, right? McVay is the genius, and everyone's talking about McVay. And Belichick just sits back. He's like, okay, this is great. This is exactly what I want. I'm waiting in the wings.
The reason that I think the Rams will win this game, though, is as much as Belichick is still Belichick, and Brady showed how accurate he can be, how well he can operate the offense, there were also so many times where the Chiefs should have won that football game, and where you can look at the Chargers and how they just got abused on the defensive side with the running game. And I don't think that that's going to happen to the Rams. I think that the Rams are a more talented team, but also that the Chiefs kind of gave them that game in a lot of ways. I mean, lining up offside for one, and then there were calls that did not go their way as well. But when I watched Peyton Manning break down that Tom Brady tape, it really stuck out to me just how many mistakes the Kansas City Chiefs defense made. And the key guy to this entire thing might be Wade Phillips, who has been there so many times and is such a great defensive coach that it's not just the old Belichick who's had all this success and been around the league for a long time. Wade Phillips has as well. Belichick said something interesting about Wade Phillips' defense. He said that it's still the same Wade Phillips defense he's been using for a really long time, but there isn't an easy way to just solve it. That it's so solid and so good that he's been teaching it for so long that the players understand it, and it's always been effective. That's the matchup that I'm really interested in here too.
I think the fact, though, that Belichick has everybody where he wants them right now, too, though. Everyone's talking about McVay, and they think that the Rams are going to win. And these Patriots, they're not great, but they are and the genius, and I don't get this, and I've been talking about this all week, and I don't understand it, but it seems to be working. The genius of the whole thing, led by Brady with, you don't believe in us. Like, you people are in, like you just said, your 10th Super Bowl, and now you're pulling out this card, but it all works. It all works. And so Coller's right. We talk about the Chiefs game, and the Patriots came close to not winning that game, but they did. And this is so Patriots. So I can't decide yet, but I'm almost leaning towards New England because of the fact that at least for one last time with Brady, they now are finally using the card that they used the first time around, and I don't think since then, which is, you don't believe in us. You don't think that we can win it. And as stupid as that sounds, and it's crazy, I think it damn well might work for them.
I picked the Patriots to win this game. We had to put our picks in, I think, what was it, like last Thursday?
I've got all the picks right here from here.
I have them 34-26, which I know is probably less. It's not as close, I think, as most people would expect. I think, honestly, one of the votes that I saw kind of circulating continuously here was 34-31. I think what's the over under on this game? 56, 57, something like that. They could hit. I think they will hit the over. Probably.
I think it's going to be high scoring.
But I'm not betting against Tom Brady in this game.
What's really something that's going to catch my eye, or that I'm really going to be looking close for, is how do the Patriots use Stephon Gilmore in this game? Because the Rams really have two sort of 1B wide receivers. I don't look at Brandon Cooks or Robert Woods as a Julio Jones or an Antonio Brown, but they're both really excellent. It's a Thielen and Diggs type of thing, that they're sort of underappreciated, but both really, really good. So there isn't that one receiver that you can just lock down and double team all day and take away. It's going to offer some different sort of problems here. And whether Gurley can come out of the backfield, you remember Corey Clement being a big guy last year for the Eagles against the Patriots. That's something that I think that the Rams can use to their advantage, is that they have more than one of these really good wide receivers. And I do think it's going to end up being one of those back and forth, lots of scoring type of games.
Well, I think also too, we talked about like 11 personnel and just how much they run it with the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the play action game is going to have a really good stat. I think that's going to be huge for them because the Patriots. So here's a stat from ESPN Stats and Info. They allowed 62% of play action passes to be completed, which is 6th best in the NFL. It's the Patriots defense. But that's 9.0 yards per attempt on those plays, which is way towards the bottom. So in the postseason, that number has jumped up to about, a first down each play action pass. And I think that when you're talking about Jared Goff and just the number of weapons that he has, that's the thing that, like, you never know who's it going to be this game. Is it going to be Tyler Higbee? Right. I tend to think a lot of teams forget about Robert Woods, that he plays on that team. Like that, he always, at least, especially when Cooper Kupp was healthy, he was always like the 3rd or 4th guy they've just forgot to cover. So that to me is, if you're the Rams, if you're looking to beat them, that's the key to doing it.
Which coach runs the wackiest play, and what play do they run? Because I do think that this is going to be a little bit of an ego competition. Somebody's going to do something wacky. We saw the pass to Brady last year that failed, and then Peterson came back and had the touchdown pass to Foles. But one of these guys, at least, if not both, is going to do something that we don't expect.
So, like, not like a tight end drag out of 22 personnel, like something like real wacky.
Something really wacky, and the onside kick is dead now. Yeah. So it can't be that.
Man.
I don't think.
Fake field goal?
Now, hang on.
Something.
The surprise onside kick is different from the end of game onside kick.
Yeah, because you're not overloaded. That's true.
The numbers on the surprise onside kick have not changed. So we might see that. Now, last year, the Patriots trying to run a pass to Brady was one of the worst decisions, I think, in football history.
It went off his fingertips, right?
It did.
Third down play.
He was wide open, but it's also Tom Brady. You're throwing him a pass, and not at the goal line, which I would understand because all he has to do is catch it. But he's in a situation to be vulnerable, reaching his hands up in the air. If they did that, I think that they've got at least one in them.
Just to clarify, did Drew Brees ever get a pass thrown in his direction this year when they would throw him out? They would flank him outside and put Taysom Hill.
I don't think he did.
That's the right idea. That should never happen.
I think he was taken off the field a few times. Yes. He was left on the field a few times.
In the NFC Championship game where they had Taysom Hill in the freaking red zones. Like, put Drew Brees in.
The Patriots, the pass that they threw to Brady last year in the Super Bowl, they ran that play a few years earlier, ironically, against the Eagles in regular season. I think Chip Kelly was coaching the Eagles at that time. But the Patriots ran that play against the Eagles, and it actually worked, and Brady picked up 25 yards or something like that. So they probably thought, oh, yeah, well, maybe you can do this again, except Brady's 4 years older and not quite as athletic as he was at that time.
When was it that Brady threw a pass on a screen and then the receiver threw it back to him and then he launched it down the field? Was that Moss? Was Moss on the team?
Maybe.
The point is,
against the Jets or something like that.
Yeah, they love to bring that stuff out every so often.
He'll do something.
Yeah.
In this game with the McVay talk, Belichick's going to do something. I guarantee it. It's the one area where ego-wise, I think he can't control himself, and he's going to say, Watch this young man. I'll show you how to play a little football.
So I always think about this with the Patriots. How much does Belichick control on the offensive side? He doesn't say anything, and he's not going to tell you. So if you were like, hey, Bill, so how much do you talk with Josh McDaniels? Be like, a lot. If even that. But when Mike Zimmer gets this criticism about being involved with the offense, not being involved with the offense, it seems like Josh McDaniels, for the last number of years, aside from the 1 year he was away, has been fully in control of that offense. When we talk about what they're going to do on offense, it's really McDaniels and the continuity that they've able to have. And sometimes he gets a little too cute with certain things, but is also a brilliant offensive play caller. And it seems like even though Belichick maybe doesn't find the best guys who can go be coaches later, head coaches, he does always seem to have someone really brilliant calling the plays.
I feel like everything gets filtered through Bill.
I mean, he's the GM and he's the head coach, and of course.
It's the reason why I say that the worst idea is to get a job and be like, Patriots blueprint, here I come. I think it would be so intriguing to spend a year just seeing how that process plays out. Because I think that you would be left with your mouth agape about how, but I think everything goes through Bill. So McDaniels has ideas and they're probably really good. And I think Bill takes them and tweaks them. So I think ultimately it all comes back to Bill, which most people just can't do. That's my opinion.
I wish I knew. I mean,
so do I.
I wish I had a better feel for what Belichick does in terms of how he manages both sides of the ball, because he was always a defensive coach. But you're right about, I mean, he is the, going back to the Parcells sort of tree, the guy who spends 19 hours a day grinding film and all that. So I have a tough time thinking he's not super involved with both sides. But as McDaniels has done so much and had so much success working with Tom Brady throughout the years, I think that it helps them a lot to have that same play caller, that same offensive mind. And it made me wonder about last year, if somehow they had been able to keep Pat Shurmur, or if the Giants had gone with someone else and Shurmur stayed and worked with Kirk Cousins instead, what would that offense have looked like? Because I see continuity all over the place on the offense with the Patriots, where they bring in the one or two guys. They bring in the Cordero Patterson to fit, or they brought in Josh Gordon for a little while to fit. But for the most part, it's the offensive lineman, the offensive line coach, the play caller, the quarterback. They've got so much continuity all the time.
I got a bizarre question. If they had told Pat, we will pay you millions to stay. Don't take the job. We will pay you $1 less than Zim, but you are our head coach offense. Do they still go sign Kirk? Does he say yes?
Or I'm keeping Keenum?
Or does he say I'm keeping Case? Or does he say I don't want to keep Case, but I can go to this guy who's cheaper? Would he have looked at Cousins' film and at Cousins and said, that's my guy? Or would he have said, let's spend elsewhere offensively and I can take a quarterback and work with that player?
I think he would have taken a look at the offensive line first. Because, I mean, if you know the writings on the wall that you're going to lose your veteran right guard, you're doing stuff at that point to mitigate that. And you could, if you don't spend the money on Kirk, you have $20-25 million you can allocate on 2 interior linemen. So you have a good backup option for when Nick Easton goes down, and you have somebody who's a viable option at right guard, and then you don't have to, you could move Mike Remmers back out to right tackle. I think that, he was able to find that workaround last year in moving Remmers inside when he had to at the end of the season, when Easton gets hurt, and in doing all of that. I think he understood the strengths and the weaknesses of his line. So to me, that would have been the primary focus there. And, who's not to say that he would have been vouching, okay, I want to try to keep Keenum, but I also want to try to keep Teddy too and draft a guy.
He also loved Sam Bradford,
which
did. Blew up in the Arizona Cardinals' face because he is shot and can't do anything with his knees anymore. Excuse me. Sorry, choked on some air there. Yeah, I was thinking.
I thought you were choked up about Pat Shurmur.
I was thinking about Shurmur, and it's like, screen passes.
Thinking of Sam Bradford. You're crying over how much money Sam Bradford has stolen from teams.
At least he made his $20 million the one time he played for the Vikings in 2016. Yeah. But just thinking about this question is interesting because Shurmur got so much out of Case Keenum. The question would he vouch for Case Keenum and say, we can do that again? I believe we can. Or would he have seen it so up close and said, oh, man, those receivers bailed him out so many times. I don't think we can do that again. I think coaches would always go for the more talented player 95% of the time. I don't know if there was any way they truly could have known about Kirk Cousins and the way he would handle a locker room and things like that. You can't know that unless it's up close and personal. You're always going to have
– You could do research on
some people, but you're always going to have some people who vouch for him endlessly. Kyle Shanahan loved him. Sean McVay loved him. I think the coach of the team always wants the best and most talented player, but it's not really about that with Cousins. It's not whether he is the best and most talented player in comparison to Case Keenum. It's really about the contract. This is really a front office question because he's clearly better than Case Keenum at football.
Right, but if you're Shermer and you are basically designated head coach offense too, it's about salary cap and where, as Courtney said, where can we improve or not improve? And if the quarterback's going to eat up all that salary and you don't think that he's the best choice, you are probably going to say, okay, if we do that, what happens at the guards?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's
an interesting question.
If you're Shermer, I think you're just saying, give me the best quarterback that we could possibly get. And that's what I'm going to want. And I also think if Shermer was the offensive coordinator, they are in the playoffs this year. And that we probably would look at Kirk Cousins a little bit differently. Now, there were still things that I would always go back to as not John DeFilippo's fault. Like there were certain no-shows, there were backward passes, there were
receivers being
fumbles,
left wide open 20 yards downfield.
Right, but the organization did not put themselves necessarily in the best position offensively to succeed, and that's what we're talking about. What would have put them organizationally? What would have been the smartest thing from Spielman on down? That's the question that comes up here, and keeping Pat Shermer definitely would have been a step now in retrospect, in hindsight, in the proper direction.
Can you have done it though? Or could you have done it just in the sense that it's a head coaching job? There's 32 of them across the NFL.
I think he was going either way.
He'd been a head coach before. Probably, it's that itch you can't scratch.
Probably not, but I think if you pay him enough and get him, if you sit him down with a bottle of really good wine and say, Pat, you're Wade Phillips. You're made to be a coordinator. God put you on this earth to coordinate.
Sure.
Some people are coaches. Pat's, I don't think, a coach. I think he is a coordinator. Wade Phillips was. So I think if you had that come to Jesus moment of truth, we're going to pay you millions. You're going to be rich. That you would have at least had a chance to have the starting point of the conversation.
They could have maybe given him the coach in waiting job too. I mean, isn't that why Josh McDaniels is staying in New England? I mean, he turned down he had the one interview with the Packers, and that's it.
And I think McDaniels has come to realize why he's successful.
Yeah.
So if you could get Pat to realize this is why I'm successful, and plus Pat, you're going to New York.
Yeah, I mean that was he knew that though. I know. Like he chose to go to those Wolves. Like that says his decision.
All right, let's take a break. Purple Daily back after this on SKOR North.